Hello and welcome to PMCLounge.com. This is Scrum 101. In this video, we are going to cover the basics of what Scrum really is. So, all those definitions, what Scrum is, all those Scrum events, product backlog, what sprint really is, all that we are going to cover as part of this video. Now, you must already be aware that PMP is now 50% agile. So this video is going to help you cover the agile part of the PMP exam. If you are preparing for your ACP exam, this video is still going to help you out. If you're preparing for any Scrum specific certification like CSM, Certified Scrum Master, this video is still going to help you out. So hang around. This won't be too long, but is definitely going to be impactful and will help you understand the concepts around Scrum. A quick reminder before we begin, please hit that like button. That seems to be the only way YouTube is going to let you know every time we upload new content. So what is Scrum? Let's start off by understanding what Scrum really is. Scrum is the most popular approach to Agile. So much so that people tend to think Scrum and Agile are the same thing. Well, that's not the case. There are different approaches of Agile. There are different ways you can achieve Agile or agility on your projects. Scrum is just one such approach, but it definitely is the most popular approach. Scrum works on few simple rules that are easy to adopt, and that is why Scrum is the most popular approach to Agile, because there are simple rules, you have simple activities to do, simple ways to adopt Scrum. Now, every Scrum project follows a series of time boxed events. And, if you don't understand this, hang around. The next slide is going to explain everything. So, for now, just understand the fact that every Scrum project follows a series of time boxed events that take place in the same order. So there are events which are part of a time box. Assume this is a time box and there are certain events that need to happen within this time box, and they always take place in the same order that you see. So that's how a project is delivered when it follows Scrum. So this slide is going to be the key in your understanding of Scrum. So I hope you're ready. Let's look at the Scrum framework. So this is an image of Scrum framework. This comes from scrum.org. All copyrights acknowledged, no copyrights infringement intended. You can go over to scrum.org and get yourself the same image. So I hope you're not overwhelmed by this. We'll understand everything that you see here. This is your Scrum 101. So what are the Scrum events? There are 5 Scrum events. You have sprint. This entire thing is basically a sprint. Then you have sprint planning session. You can see it here. Then you have number 3 is daily Scrum. And you have daily Scrum here, which is basically an event that is repeated every day. Then you have sprint review, and finally you have sprint retrospective. Now you might think, how come there are 5 events, but I see other items here like product backlog, sprint backlog, increment, one Scrum team. What is all this? So these are also concepts that you should be aware of when it comes to Scrum. So let's try to understand all of this, starting off with the first definition of what sprint really is. Sprint is a time boxed iteration. Remember, I told you time box in the previous slide as well. So sprint is basically a time boxed iteration. It could be of 30 days. It could also be of 14 days or 2 weeks. So different organizations and different projects have different ways of defining their sprint. Scrum does not mandatorily ask you to have a sprint for 30 days or 14 days. It's up to the project team to define and decide what their time box duration should be. At each sprint, a shippable product increment is created. Now, like I said, all of this all of this is a sprint, which means when you go over all these activities at least once, you are going to generate a shippable product increment, right? I hope this is clear. Once you are done, you will generate a shippable product increment, something which is mentioned here, right? The rightmost box. Okay, the next item on the list is product backlog. What is this product backlog that you see here? This is nothing but basically a list of all the features or all the items that the team plans to build. This is your single source of requirements. What this means is your product manager, if he or she has an idea, he or she is going to come in and enter that idea in the product backlog. If you receive a feedback from the customer, that is going to come in and entered into the backlog. If the engineering team proposes certain features, they are going to come in and sit in the backlog. So product backlog is your single source of requirements for your project or the product. I hope that is clear. Next is sprint planning. You see sprint planning here, which is one of the sprint events, number 2 here, right? So what is this sprint planning session? This is basically a session or a meeting which is performed at the beginning of each sprint. So when you're starting your sprint, the first thing you're going to do is to do a sprint planning session. And what you're basically doing is deciding what all items will be included in the sprint. So you're taking a look at your product backlog and you're deciding, these are the items that we are going to take in as part of this sprint. So no points for guessing. What happens next is that these all items move to the sprint backlog, and that's how you arrive at sprint backlog. Items, these items could be, bug fixes, these could be feature, anything, right? So these items applicable to the sprint are pulled from the product backlog and entered into the sprint backlog, something that we did here, right? So after your sprint planning session, the team finalizes what all needs to be part of the sprint, what all needs to be in scope for the sprint, and items are pulled from the product backlog and they enter the sprint backlog. During the sprint, the team focuses only on these items. As simple as that. So moving on, let's talk about the next item in the list, which is the daily scrum. You see it here, daily scrum in the circle. This is nothing but a daily team meeting. The scrum team meets every single day and they discuss the progress of the sprint and upcoming work, as well as if there are any impediments that of course the scrum master can help resolve or help remove. So that's what daily scrum team meeting is all about. Now, after that, the next point in this entire framework is the sprint review. So you do daily scrum. This is something that you do every single day. So if your sprint is, let's say, 30 days or 14 days, then that means you will do daily scrum for 14 days. Once you are done, then you will do a sprint review. So what is this sprint review? Once your sprint is complete, so that means 14 days are over and your sprint is complete, the team meets for a sprint review. This is again a session where you also invite the users or the customers, right? And you are basically going to give a demo of the working software. So remember, we talked about how in a sprint you should be able to create a shippable product increment. Here it is, shippable product increment, right? So when you create a shippable product increment, at the end of the sprint, you also give a demo of that shippable product increment, and you do that with your users in a session known as sprint review. I hope sprint review is clear. And finally, the last thing that you see here, so this is the increment. This is something that you have reviewed with your customer. From here on, you move to the last item in the Scrum framework, which is sprint retrospective. This is also a Scrum event. Just like the sprint review was, sprint retrospective is also a Scrum event. And this is basically a meeting, again, a session or a meeting where the Scrum team basically looks at what went well and what are the areas of improvement. So this is basically collating feedback, trying to understand what went well, what didn't go well, what we should improve on, what we should start doing, what we should stop doing, what we should continue doing. Questions like these, open-ended questions where everyone from the Scrum team can come in and give their feedback. Based on that, all those feedback will be treated as an input in your sprint planning, the next sprint planning session. Once again, when you do sprint planning, you are then going to decide what are the next set of items, features, or bugs that you're going to pull in from the product backlog into the second sprint's sprint backlog. So that's how this entire sprint cycle keeps on moving, and that's how you basically follow the Scrum framework to deliver the product or complete the project. So for those of us who have the traditional waterfall model imbibed in us, I added this slide just for you guys because it sometimes becomes difficult to imagine what you're going to do, how you're going to deliver a 6 months long project using sprint, right? So you're basically going to have 6 sprints of 30 days each if your project is 6 months long, which means you do all of this 6 times, which means you deliver a shippable project increment 6 times to the customer. You meet with the customer 6 times and the customer reviews the product, goes on reviewing, and he or she might have feedback after the the second time you do the sprint review. The customer may have certain feedback and he might add some features or bug fixes or some items in your product backlog, which again then goes to your sprint backlog based on whatever that you speak in the sprint planning session. So I just added this slide for my waterfall enthusiasts so that they can understand how sprints work when it comes to large projects like a 6 month long project. A quick reminder, all our articles and videos belonging to the PMP courseware are available here. Head over to pmclounge.com/PMP training. Everything is free. Finally, here's the question for this video. What time box of sprint do you use? 30 days, 14 days, or is there some other kind of time box that you use? You might be doing it more aggressively and using a time box of 7 days, or you might be more laid back and kind of using something like 2 months. Let me know in the comments. Definitely looking forward to your answers. So that's all that we had in this video. I hope you got value out of it. I hope you were able to understand the basics of Scrum. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to stay notified every time we upload new content. Don't forget to check out the website pmclounge.com, your number one free PMP resource. Thank you and have a nice day.